We're talking about Apple earnings, and Tom, 65 million. That is the number I am looking at because that is how many iPhones Apple is forecast to have sold in the last quarter. We know both you and I did our part. We've got a new iPhone 6. 65 million, though, Tom, it is also roughly the population of France. That should blow your mind. Cory Johnson is our Bloomberg West editor-at-large. He crawled out of the bed in the middle of the night in a very snowless San
Thank you,
Francisco.
Cory.
Trudging through the snow, uphill both ways.
To preview Apple's results.
I can talk to you about some snow.
I saw you wearing a giraffe hat in the block. I'm disappointed that you put that away. But, Cory, talk to us about Apple. Is it all about that iPhone number, or what else should we be looking for in today's report?
You know, this is actually, strangely, for the market at least, for those who trade this stock, a very crucial quarter. This is the quarter in which we're going to have a full sale of iPhone 6 and 6 Plus sales, a new iPhone. 2 years ago, and 2 years before that, when we had iPhone 4 and the iPhone 3 releases, we had big moves in Apple stock. We had big quarters, and in both cases, the stock sold off quite a bit. I think one of the things we might walk away from when we get the results tonight is not just looking at the importance of the iPhone, but look at the importance of Apple in China. I think it really will illustrate the position that Apple's in, where they don't lead in market share, where they have probably only about 20% market share, but about 80% of the industry's profits. And China may indeed be the biggest market for the iPhone. We'll find out later today.
Cory, compare and contrast 89-some billion at Microsoft versus Apple, almost double that, 155 billion. Should we see a use of cash announcement this afternoon?
I don't expect anything like that from Apple because they've already sort of laid out their plans that way, both in terms of repurchases and in just in terms of deploying capital, with whatever they're doing in terms of managing. One of the things about their capital, of course, is it's dispersed all over the world, and they've used it in very clever ways to provide financing for vendors, for companies like Foxconn to buy the equipment to make the iPhone special. And they've been very clever about that use of cash. I wouldn't expect anything different. I do think it was notable last night that Microsoft actually called an end to their buyback. Mind you, the end of next 2016, but they announced that their $60 billion buyback will end by next year, and I think that's one of the reasons in after hours the stock traded off.
Hey, Cory, looking at the earnings yesterday from Microsoft, I was struck that, they missed analyst estimates for revenue on licenses for Windows and Word, but they still made $10.2 billion. That's an incredible engine going forward, even if it's something they're slowly getting out of.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the last quarter when Microsoft benefits, certainly from the brief surprise we had at the end of last year when PC sales ticked up in spite of all the movement we have towards the world of mobile, the world of tablets. But because they stopped supporting Windows XP, there was a rush to do corporate upgrades, and we saw a big bump in the third quarter and a lesser bump in the fourth quarter. That greatly aided Satya Nadella in his first year as CEO. But what we saw from the guidance in the conference call in particular was that that's over. And that ain't happening anymore. And when they gave us some discussion about unbilled revenues and things, we can see that unbilled revenues, the growth in unbilled revenues, what they kindly don't call deferred revenues, that growth is not as great as some of the bulls might have hoped, and that we're entering into a new period for Microsoft where the sledding is going to get tougher.
An appropriate analogy for today, or metaphor.
Thank you.
Cory, what about FX? It was just a few weeks ago that we saw Apple had to raise the price of iPhones in Moscow because the ruble had sold off. Is the stronger dollar going to bite into Apple's earnings? Did you see any of that in Microsoft yesterday?
We absolutely saw it in Microsoft yesterday. We're going to see it probably a little bit in Apple, and we're going to see a lot of it over the course of really the next 4 months. I mean, we're talking about fourth quarter FX, not what's happened in the first quarter already. So I think for a handful of tech companies that sell particularly into Europe, companies like Cisco, where nearly a third of sales are into Europe, they're going to see some serious FX headwinds, and no one's really counting that into their models just yet. So we could be in for some negative surprises in a big way for a lot of the big enterprise tech companies.
Certainly a big wild card, Cory. We dearly appreciate your getting out of bed at 3 a.m. to join us.